Welcome back, Free Spirits. Today's guest is not your typical spiritual leader. Catherine Sforcina is a serial entrepreneur, C-level executive, systems thinker, shaman, initiated Vision Quest guide, author, and founder of Transforming Tribes. She has advised global leaders and tech companies, built and scaled businesses across multiple industries, and was recently voted Best Spiritual Practitioner in the Australia Holistic Practitioner Awards. Woo! Quite an accomplishment. But behind the boardrooms and sacred ceremonies is a woman who had to dismantle an entire identity shaped by trauma, addiction to suffering, autoimmune illness, and patterns of abuse that followed her from childhood into adulthood. This conversation is about healing at the root, about breaking cycles, about shadow work, about leadership, and about remembering who you truly are. Catherine, welcome to Flying Upstream.
Thank you, Kristen. It's so amazing to be here with you today.
I'm super excited. Okay, let's dive in. So you grew up in a home with domestic violence. And I think this is actually probably more common than we realize, because when you're growing up, you think that's normal. The environment you grew up in is just your baseline. How did that environment shape the way that you learned to survive in the world?
Yeah, it's definitely, I think, more common than we realize. I think the statistics in Australia is something like 6 out of every 10 people have experienced it at some point in their life.
Wow.
Which is quite amazing. I don't think the stats in America and other parts of the world are too far behind that. So it is something that a lot of people meet, and there's so many different forms of abuse as well, that we're only just really starting to understand the full impact of how they actually shape someone's future life. I think for me, like many in that situation, it really shaped my ability to read a room. Yeah, I got very, very good at understanding, to clock everything that's going on around me, to gauge my level of safety, to try and predetermine threats and to respond accordingly. And so I guess you could say the skills that I learned from that experience have really shaped my ability to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And to a great degree, I believe, was very much the shadow aspect of my ability to work with energy medicine as a shaman. So it's quite beautiful and wonderful how some of our deepest and darkest things can actually transmute into some of the most extraordinary medicines in our life if we let them. But yeah, I would definitely say it's the reading the room that's just so different for someone who's been through situations like that.
Yes, and I appreciate how you're saying that, you grew up in an abusive household and you still had skills that allowed you to succeed in life, right? Like you became wildly successful very young. By your mid-20s, you had already turned companies into global successes, which is like phenomenal. Like not many people do that. What were you chasing during that season of your life?
Yeah, and that's an incredible question. Look, I was chasing security. I was chasing the validation that I didn't get as a young one. And I was chasing it in ways the world saw as healthy. So I had figured that, and I don't believe this was the impression of people around me, by the way, but I had figured that I had come out unscathed and had really been able to better myself from the experience. I mean, I owned my first home at 18. I was flipping houses multiple times by the time I was early 20s, and as well as, yes, by the time I was 25, my first company had gone multinational. So the drive to succeed, to prove that I could be more in the world, it was extreme for me. And I can't say the obsession was fully healthy, but it definitely served a purpose in this modern context of commercialization that we live in.
Yes. And And that's a great point that you bring up, right? Because you were obviously working extremely hard. Failure was not an option. You wanted to escape what you had grown up with, to prove yourself that you were worthy, that you could do this on your own. And in working so hard and proving yourself, there can be a lot of pain in that and a lot of suffering. And I think you've even said that you were addicted to the pain and the suffering. And that's such a powerful statement. I want to unpack that a little bit. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, look, I think when we grow up in environments, I call it the opposites game when I speak with clients. It's like, oh, they'll talk about being broken about the way that they were raised, or traumatic things that have happened in their life, and how they would identify threat as opportunity and opportunity as threat, because the environment that we're raised in, when we have those experiences, teaches us that love is harm.
Yeah.
Not to look for the love in the moments that are really sweet and soft and beautiful, but unless there is this deep destabilization in our being, we think something is wrong. And so going into startup mode, the destabilization in the startup is crazy. There's so much ambiguity. So I think also it was a natural progression for me to have another outlet for that destabilization to occur in my life. Again, looking for a healthy outlet. I also became a mum when I was 19 and had my second at 22. So I was juggling motherhood at such a young age too. So I had all of these chaotic things happening in my life that gave me that destabilization, which made me feel normal. And yet at the core of all of that, we have this innate belief that if we're safe, if we're held, if we're loved, if we're seen, something must be wrong. And so that is something that I really had to meet. I don't think I understood it as an addiction until much later, 2 husbands later and 3 children later and 5 businesses later. But definitely I realized there was a very strong thread. I called it my balconies and my basements. So whilst my personal life that everyone else got to see in my professional life was flying high and looked like I was just an absolute champion, which I was in the context of our modern society, I was dealing with my dark basements. I was hiding domestic violence at home in my marriages. I was a completely disempowered woman because of this deep need to find ways to sabotage myself. And that might have been through binge eating so that I could never quite be the weight, no matter how much exercise I did, or it might have been through making alliances in business that whilst I was so successful on paper, I would end up meeting and associating with the wrong kinds of people and be done out of huge amounts of money as a result. So I learned some really big lessons around what it means to pull the rug out from underneath myself all the time, because I certainly don't blame my upbringing or other people on the fact that I chose to make those decisions through that particular wounded lens. By the time I was an adult, it was my responsibility to meet these things about myself, and it took a lot of the universe showing that mirror in my face time and time again, increasingly more and more intensity, for me to actually say, okay, the common denominator is you, darling, and it's time that we really excavate this. You can't yoga this away. You can't breath work this away. We've got to do something here.
Yeah, that's fair. So tell me a bit about the breaking point that you hit. So at 35, you hit this breaking point. What happened that forced you to stop and truly look at your patterns and make different choices going forward?
Yeah, I would say that the domestic violence in my second marriage had escalated massively, and that is still something I try not to dive into too much detail about, because my children are now getting old enough that they can listen to things like this, and I have healed the relationship with my second husband to a point where we do a fantastic job of co-parenting now. And I can honestly say I have all the meta love in my heart for that man, because he chose to give me some of the biggest lessons that I have ever learnt, and he's done real work on himself. And so we're able to have that co-parenting relationship. So I don't want to demonize anyone here either. But for me, what was happening at 35 was a deep recognition that I had become my mother in my personal relationships, and that the pattern was still following me. And now I was 3 children deep, and it's a deep desire that it wouldn't follow them into their lives. And there's not really too much you can do as a parent who's gone through those kinds of things, with your romantic partners, with their fathers, that allows you to fully protect. They've signed up to Growth Planet too, and their souls chose me as their mum and their dads as their dad. So it's one of those things, that they're going to have their own journey with what happens from that too. But it's being a mother of 3 children, having so much of my life tied into this mechanism of coercive control, and having basically feeling I had no option of where to go, that I realized the only option was I've got to figure out how to get underneath the foundation here, because the foundation's actually rotten. I was trying to, every time something fell over, I was building a new house, and the house was bright and shiny and amazing, and I had all the bedrooms, I had the full deck, it had the everything, but I was building it on a foundation that was completely rotten, so it kept imploding. And so it was time to go underneath and excavate, and I made a commitment to myself to not stop until I had just gone to the deepest places beneath me, beneath where this stuff came from, into the root of my essence and my soul's journey, beyond what this lifetime was.
Yeah.
And, I can't say that it suddenly became perfect and wonderful, but I understood, and I was able to become more aware, and I was able to start making different choices for myself. So, yeah, it was a really pivotal time in my life at that time.
Yeah, I really sympathize with that moment for you, where you kind of realize, like, it's been bad for a long time, but there's that moment where you're like, I literally can't do this anymore, right? And recognizing it's not only about you, but you have 3 children, and obviously your decisions impact them as well, and needing to make the best decision for them too. And one of these good decisions that you made was that you started working with shamans and exploring your Incan lineage. I'm really curious to know, what did the energy medicine unlock for you that traditional success and the other external validations you've had in the past, what did that unlock that those never could?
Yeah, it was interesting, because it was a slow burn for me. I think since I was 16, 17, 18, I mean, I had to actually initially overcome this whole thing of there being something more than me, because I was raised in a very strict Seventh-day Adventist household that had all of this domestic violence going on. So for me, any kind of religious belief was, everything spiritual was put into the box of religion, basically. And put into a box of toxic, and I'm not going there for a while. Yet I had discovered hot yoga. I discovered, all these incredible breathwork processes that would take me into very deep spaces, but I was refusing to call them spiritual experiences. And so when it came to this aspect of my journey in discovering shamanic medicine, it actually began through Vision Quest and journeying with ayahuasca. I journeyed with ayahuasca very many times. Began apprenticing as a curanderas at one point to learn how to serve the medicine. And that led me to the path of the Andean Incan lineage, where I, without plant medicine and psychedelics, was able to start to fully connect with more than human realms. And I think the vision questing, so that's a process of being very deep and very still, very quiet in nature, where you give up all of the familiar and you are in a very held container. You are literally sitting on your own in the wilderness for 4 days and 4 nights without food, just water and very basic sleeping gear. You're in the same spot the whole time. Very, very sacred and very held place. So that definitely gifted me, those experiences gifted me this incredible ability to realize we had so much more than this world, than the physical, tangible, what we can see and touch, that we can relate to and meet. That coupled with the ayahuasca experiences really opened me up to there being all these other ways that we receive information, that when we're in our conscious present state as a human being in the 3D world, we don't really pay any attention to. That when I met Andean Incan medicine and recognized that those two formats of, or modalities, you could say, were also something that supported a map of the soul, and that I could walk this map and start teaching other people how to heal that map after I'd navigated my own map deep enough. It became very clear to me that we have a way of very intentionally meeting the very root of whatever these illnesses in our energetic body are, and bring them back into balance with the rest of our being. So it's not that they didn't happen, but it's like a wave meeting the shoreline. It looks really ferocious as it comes in, but then it just disappears. The impact it has is nothing on the sand. And so, yeah, that was very much my experience of shamanic energy medicine, and just understanding that there are ways in this world that are not traditional, that have been practiced for thousands of years, that have such impact and effectiveness on healing our physical, mental, energetic, spiritual, emotional bodies. And once I'd experienced that healing for myself, I wanted it for other people.
I mean, that's really profound and really deep. And I especially want to recognize that you said you were doing hot yoga for a long time and you were going to a deep place, but you just weren't using like the label of spiritual or whatever that right word is, but you still kind of had, you kind of were on like the tip of the iceberg with that. You were still doing it, but it just wasn't kind of healing in the way that you needed at the time. And so I want to call that out because I think it's really common where people are doing things like yoga, meditation, all kinds of things that are good for our soul, but we're not necessarily using certain words about it, right? And so there's kind of two parts. One is that even if you're not using the right words, or I shouldn't say the right words, but you're not using words that are kind of healing or deeper, you know, good on you for still doing it, right? Still taking that step, still trying, still moving in that direction. And then the other side of that is recognizing that if it feels good, go for it, right? Like you were doing the hot yoga, you said, and then eventually you're kind of like, okay, I'm going to take it a step further, if you will. And you went to ayahuasca, shaman work, and so on. And just being able to recognize in yourself that felt good for you, that felt really good, and trying to match the inside of like what feels like good on the inside with the actions you're doing on the outside. And I just really want to call attention to that.
Yeah, I think it's really important that we recognize our body has an innate intelligence. And when we stop resisting the mirror that is the world around us and we start using it as the lesson, that's probably the awareness factor of all of that. Seeing that we can observe what's going on without judgment. I think when we do into mindful practices, I mean, I at one point, I would do the 30-day hot yoga challenge whenever it would be held at my studio. And I'd go sometimes 2 or 3 times in a day. I got a little obsessive with it, to be honest. But by the 3rd class, I now know I was in a transcendental state in that day, which is why I would go those 3 times, because it was like, what am I touching here? When I allow the surrender of, when we go to a deep place that feels so uncomfortable, but we allow ourselves to surrender into that discomfort, I was opening something up in me, and my soul knew I was just nibbling around the edge of the cookie on something that I really needed to dive in deeper and explore, for sure.
Yeah, that's beautiful. So now you work with top CEOs. You also work with people who feel they cannot function without chaos or abuse in their lives. What is one core element that you think prevents true healing across all those people, across all those groups?
Yeah, and it really is a diverse group. I mean, I could have in the same day a session with a top executive from Google, for example, and also a stay-at-home mum who's completely stuck in where life has her right now. And, detectives, lawyers, you name it. Everyone has something more than what we're actually sharing with than our regular associations in the world. And so nothing from a story perspective surprises me anymore. We are capable of deep cruelty and also deep love as human beings. And certainly there is, and this work exposes you to the full spectrum of humanity, for sure. But as we go through, there is always the common threads, and that's actually the topic of the 2nd book I'm writing right now, is about the pandemic addiction that we actually all have if we've been brought up in the modern world.
Wow.
And it's how we deal with that addiction that actually shapes our life and has nothing to do, to a degree, with the other experiences we have. It's got to do with this one thing. And what I've discovered is at the root cause of all pain, all suffering, at the root cause of every self-sabotage and every pattern that we embody that takes us out of balance with ourselves in some ways, we have become addicted to victimhood. And I've come to that conclusion because, well, everything in our society in the modern day life tells us that we need something outside ourselves in order to be successful, to be healthy, to be loved, to belong, to be accepted, to be smart, to be funny. Everything requires something outside ourselves, a medication to numb the pain, rarely to heal the root cause. We'll double down on the types of food we eat. We must have 3 meals a day. We must, we're eating foods that addict us to food in general. We're addicted to social media platforms. We're addicted to work. We're addicted to exercise. We're addicted to doing in order to earn our place as a whole healed human. And yet the more we reach outside ourselves for something to rescue us, for something to be the answer to, when I get this, then I'll be happy, whatever the this is, we are buying into a core wound of victimhood. And to the point where many times we believe it's someone else's responsibility to make us feel. And I had to have a very big lesson on this. I honestly did not believe we were able to choose our own emotions, that someone else dictated how we should feel and what we should do and say. And that I was powerless in that choice. And that, yes, that comes from being raised in a certain way as well, where your feelings aren't validated and you have to deny the pain or the experience of being terrified in order to pander to a parent's desire of what they want you to conform to. Sure, there's those kinds of dynamics going on, but as an adult who then has sovereignty over their soul and their being, we then have to realize that we get to actually make the choice. And yeah, recognizing that everything is actually a choice, whether we're making it consciously or not is another question. But when we look at where our lives are and where we're going with the trajectory of that life, I would say 99% of people who begin working with me have got a list of reasons that all sit in the bucket of I'm a victim as to why their life isn't where they want it to be right now. It's what's kept them scarce, sick, stuck, and suffering. And so when we look at the root cause of any hard addiction, that maybe I call them hard addictions when we're talking about substance abuse and things like that, porn addictions and stuff like that. When we're looking at those, it's literally the body's mechanism of saying, I'm so wounded, I have this huge hole, and I need something outside myself to fill that hole, to numb that pain. What I've found with my work is that when we heal the wound of victimhood, we also heal the thirst to keep going after something outside ourselves, to do that work of pretending we're whole or we're successful, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that does. I especially appreciate your comment about when we are addicted to hard substances, like you said, it's because we have a hole that we're trying to fill. And so many people don't understand that aspect of it. They think that it's for a million other reasons. Oh, they really like the taste of alcohol, or they like whatever it is. But that's not really what's behind it all. And having the courage, not even just the knowledge alone and awareness, but just the pure courage to peel back that layer can really unlock a lot for us. And not just about our wounds that need to be healed, but also about what is right for us, what brings us joy and happiness, and what lights us up. And then that's the path that you can actually pursue. So
yeah, totally.
Really
I think you like, even from an identity perspective, there's so many things about our personality and our identity that we believe are just hard as rock. This is just how we're wired. That are literally a byproduct of recognizing that we are seeking and searching something outside ourselves, and therefore we've created a very clever tool, like coping mechanism or a defense mechanism or a way of dealing with conflict or uncertain situations. We create these fun little tools to help us survive, but we also create a reliance and addiction on something else to be the thing that can soothe the wound.
Absolutely. Gosh.
Yeah.
Well, Catherine, you've really shared so much wisdom today, and we're kind of winding down. I've got one last question for you. So, as you know, on this podcast, we talk about flying upstream and choosing that unconventional path. What does flying upstream mean to you now after everything you have lived through and reclaimed?
Yeah, I think it comes down to continuing to do the work to own my truth and my authenticity, to really have that relationship with sitting in the truth of how I want to express myself and how my medicine is being called to express in that moment. Because no, it's not a conventional path I've followed by any stretch of the imagination. And yet there's an innate drive in me to continue to create and to continue to bring awareness to our human condition in ways that may not have necessarily been looked at before. I believe all healing paths are really beneficial, but it's when we connect the dots with what actually works for our particular soul map, that we light up this path inside us that becomes that North Star and that direction we can keep moving forward. And so it got to take us right back to the beginning of our conversation, that ease and flow, and just what feels good is often the path of such least resistance that we can create from that path. And so, yeah, really honoring what feels good in my body, what feels good in my life, and doing as much of that as possible. And it seems to work wonders.
Beautiful. Catherine, thank you for your honesty, your courage, and for sharing the depth of your lived experience with us today. And for Free Spirits, conversations like this really open doors for people who might not even realize they're standing at one. So thank you again. So appreciate you being here, and thanks so much for joining.
Thanks so much, Kristen. It's been amazing. You have a beautiful day.
Thank you.